Hello and welcome to the Midnight Choir, the Rover Media's weekly podcast about pretty much anything to do with Quebec, politics, the world, and anything that is pressing on our minds that we believe needs to be talked about. Hello, Antonine. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
This is our guest this week. We also have Senor Floof. He is my cat. He will just be lounging there. Hi there. Welcome to the Midnight Choir, the Rovers weekly podcast. Tabarnak. Hello and welcome to the Midnight Choir, the Rovers weekly podcast. Listen, if you like this, subscribe below, like this video, go check out the podcast, the audio only version, whatever you want. Share it with your friends. We need your support, whether it's free or not free. If you want to give us money, please give us money. If you don't want to give us money, that's fine. Take us to the courts. We'll give you money. That was a joke. Please. Don't do that.
We will lose.
IRL, go sign up on the rover.ca/support-us. That's the rover.ca/support. God damn. The rover.ca support/ Chris.
That is the rover.ca/support-us. The rover.ca/support-us.
Chris, how are you today?
I'm good. Yeah, I thought I had a cold, but I maybe I don't, right? I don't have a cold. I'll be fine. Yeah, exactly. Stay away. The kid is always getting us sick. But yeah, Antonine, our guest today is Antonine Yaccarini, who I said that in the most like
Yaccarini.
Yaccarini.
How do you say that?
I love it.
Yaccarini.
Yaccarini.
Antonine Yaccarini. Who, if you're an Anglophone and you don't consume news in French, well, then you should, and you can see Antonine on Les Débatteurs on Nouveau Info. You can see her on RDI. You have a podcast called Duo. You were the former head of communications for the leader of the Parti Québécois. You were the head of communications for the Parti Québécois' 2018 campaign. Your CV is obviously much better than ours. Thank you for debasing yourself and coming to a basement in NDG.
Thank you so much. And I need to say this. It's my first interview in English ever. Maybe the last, depending on how it goes. So it's a big challenge for me. It's very, very challenging for me. I decline interviews in English all the time.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because I'm a little scared of, saying the wrong thing or humiliate myself. Or,
that's understandable. We all,
Would I do an interview in French? I think
Of course you would.
I think I would.
I know you.
You
If you knew 3 words in Mandarin, you'd do an interview in Mandarin. Isaac, that's the kind of person you are.
Well, today we're going to be talking about quite a diverse amount of topics, so let's get right into it. I just wanted to hear a little bit about your life, Antonine, to start off. Like, where have you worked? How did you get into politics? Could you give us just kind of an overview of your trajectory?
Yes. So where should I start? I studied political science in college. At the time, I wasn't planning on going, working for political parties or anything like that. I was just interested. Actually, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I needed to upgrade my grades to get in. So I started political science degree in order to, have good grades and switch back to the program I wanted to get into. And I fell in love, actually. My parents were really interested in politics. We had always good discussions during the dinner and stuff, but I wasn't really interested in, being a real political staff or even just a political party member or anything like that. And my first job when I came out of college was in not a charity, but in French we say OBNL.
Yeah, like an NGO.
Called the Association Québécoise de Prévention du Suicide, so Suicide Prevention. And my boss was Bruno Marchand. You talked about him in your last episode.
The mayor of Quebec City.
He's now the mayor of Quebec City, and it was my first boss, my first job. Really interested in politics too, and we were obsessed with The West Wing.
The show?
The show.
Yeah, great show.
Yeah,
great show.
And
Aaron Sorkin.
He's what an amazing writer.
And the press secretary, CJ Craig, in
I've
that
never
show.
seen the show, but
you should.
Yeah, I will.
It's old school, but
yeah, sure. Some of it hasn't aged well.
Yeah.
It's like
and I wanted to be her. I just started to really wanting that, like, I'm going to be a press secretary was my objective, my goal at the time. So I started to get involved in my riding, Jean Talon, in Quebec City. And it was in 2012, right before the
Right around the
election.
time the student strike and
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a really interesting period of time where everything was changing, and there was the strikes. I was in the streets with the students and everything, and I got involved in the PQ at that time because the Liberal government was kind of the end of the regime.
yeah, it was an astounding, like,
How long
the
were they in
amount-
power?
they were in power for almost 10 years.
Okay, yeah, that's
And
about time for a regime change.
it was like every imaginable scandal and a student strike and I remember, I think that we met in 2012 after you guys won.
Yes, because after the election we won, and my
Go back
candidate.
a second. So you started working for the PQ
Absolutely.
just before they ran, or what?
Yes, like 6 months before the campaign.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
did the campaign in my riding.
And what was your job?
I was a press secretary for the candidate
Okay.
in Jean Talon, which
C'était
was
qui? Who was it back then?
Neko Likongo. He was a very good candidate, but Jean Talon was really a Château Fort libéral.
Yeah.
It
And
was,
now it's a Kekist
Yeah.
Chateau Fort.
and now it's back.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a PQ right
Oh,
now.
yeah?
So everything is
Jean Talon
changing.
is
Just
the
one
PQ.
PQ.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Just
right.
one.
That's right.
Last year they won for the first time. Jean Talon. It was really really surprising.
Yeah.
So after the election, I got hired in Affaires
The
autochtones.
office? Oh, yeah, that's right.
And
Indigenous Affairs,
Indigenous
yeah.
Affairs,
And
yeah.
this is where I heard about Chris for the first time, because he was the only journalist calling me. Okay, so hi, it's Christopher. At the
Yeah.
time, you were calling yourself Christopher.
That's
not
right.
Chris.
Yeah,
Christopher from the Gazette,
very
And
fancy.
the only journalist in Quebec interested in those kind of topics about.
You still might be.
It changed.
No, it's evolved immensely, and I'm super happy with that. And our coverage of and understanding of these issues has evolved, and we could always be better, but it's much better. It's like a universe of difference between now and then.
I agree.
You could say shit back then that like you wouldn't get 2 feet out the house today and say that. Like it's good. We're much past that.
So you were working as the press secretary, and then you worked as the Indigenous Affairs minister, or just
Yes.
in the office? Okay.
Worked for the minister. You weren't the minister.
You
That
weren't
would've
the
been-
Oh,
minister.
no,
You worked
sorry.
for the minister.
It's
You were
an
briefly a minister.
important
That's why I'm clarifying.
precision.
That's why I'm clarifying, just for people.
No, press secretary at the time, and
Okay.
Chris was the only one calling me at the time.
Understood.
And then I Don't Know More movement started, and I
Yeah.
became the flavor of the month for a month. All the journalists, every journalist, they wanted to have something about
a little tidbit about a protest
yes.
or about
exactly.
Okay. And so after that, then where did you go with that?
So after that, there was the 2014 campaign that we lost miserably. It was still PTSD.
It was a rough campaign, yeah.
It was a rough campaign. We had little we didn't have like really inspiring promises. It was a hard campaign. I was booking the interviews for all the candidates in the whole province. So
Oh,
it was
God.
kind of a crazy job. I was working from 5 a.m. to like 11
For how
p.m.
long?
and 5 weeks.
It
I
was
was
I
sick.
remember
Long
it was
time.
a
That's a long
long and
time.
brutal campaign.
It was
and mean.
brutal. It
16
wasn't
hours
fun.
a day for
Yeah.
6 weeks is a lot.
Yeah, and I was on the phone with journalists all day long, and it was
Well, having a
not nice.
family.
Oh yeah.
throw that in
Actually,
there.
when you go in a campaign, you just forget about your family for
I
for
believe
5
that.
weeks.
No, I
like you
believe you.
disappear.
Yeah.
You say goodbye.
They know if you're married to someone who's
Yes.
in this, you know.
Yes, but I've always managed to, have a family life. Even when I was in political offices, I'm a well-organized person, so I'm really productive. So
Yeah.
I think I'm succeeding at that, like
Yeah.
taking care of my kids.
I
but
mean, your
The
job
only
was press
person in
secretary.
the end who's gonna like you rob time from yourself, right? Like,
yes,
You don't sleep. You work late.
men, they are really more involved now with the kids and everything, so it's easier. We always find a way, my husband and I, to be able to pursue our careers and take care of the kids at the same time. I know it's a
because
little
your
cliche.
husband is also was also, and
Yeah.
sorry, this is, I think, is an important part of the story. Your husband also involved in politics, also like really deep in the party. That
Yes.
must have been like
He was at the PQ way before me. He was involved like maybe, I don't know, 5 years before I was. We met there. So I had another boyfriend when I came into politics, and it sometimes actually often happens that you a lot of separations and splits in politics, because when your boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband, wife is not as involved and as interested into politics, sometimes you grow apart a little bit. It's hard to understand for people not in politics to understand that we are obsessed, working like
consumed.
18 hours a day. It's very hard to understand. We are like in a little bubble, and that's the way it is. And we call our friends during the summer when the Assemblée Nationale is closed, and we're like, "Hi, do you like me again? Are you still my friend?" That's the way it works. Yeah.
Remember me?
So 2014, you got fucking trounced.
Yeah.
And then what'd you do?
I left. I took a plane to Florida. I left for like 3 weeks. And when I turned my phone on again, there was a message, like a vocal message on my phone. It was my boss actually saying, "Where are you? We're waiting for you at the office." So there was a job for me in the opposition. Is that the
Yep, that's it. That's
opposition?
it.
Okay.
Yep.
So I became press secretary for the opposition leader, Stéphane Bédard. At the time, it was an interim. It was right after Madame Marois resigned, and it was the best year of my life. Actually, it was awesome. It was hard because we lost, but it was fun. We had an amazing team, and we did a great job. Actually, it was really, really hard. That was the time when Pierre-Carl Pelado became an MP. He wanted to run to become the new PQ leader. It was a really interesting period of time for the PQ.
It was like, I remember thinking, this is it, like right here. Like they I don't know. I mean, I think it was, and probably for you too, it was hard for a lot of people to square that, or to, given that like Pierre-Carl Pelado was so fervently anti-union and pretty
Quebec
conservative.
Is the union province.
I mean, yeah, no, he busted a lot of unions. He was at 14 or 16. It was a lot of union busting, and kind of like one of those. It's like when you make those decisions with your you kind of outsmart yourself. You're like, well, he's going to be considered a genius in business, and he knows what he's doing. Look at the cat on your lap. But on the flip side, he kind of does betray a few of our core values. And I remember, just as an observer and someone who always has had a complicated love-hate relationship with your party, that one was like hard for me to take. That one was like, I don't like this person.
Because traditionally the PQ was really close with
labor,
the unions
yeah.
and labor. But Quebec Solidaire was taking a lot of more space and more electorate.
Yeah, they're kind of like outflanking you to the left a little bit.
Absolutely.
So you find some votes somewhere else. Can I ask, like, has there ever been, whether it's at the PQ or anywhere, has there ever been a decision by, well, you know what, it has to be at the PQ because it's who you're associated with. Were there ever decisions that really made it difficult to stay, where it's like, I don't agree with?
Absolutely.
Yeah? If you can,
if you're allowed, yeah.
Yeah, I can talk about it. I'm comfortable. Actually, when you are involved in a political party, if you are comfortable with, I'd say 80 or 75% of the decisions, the propositions of the party, it's good. So there are always some things that you are not exactly comfortable with. When during the Madame Marois' government, there was a decision to finance cimenterie.
Yeah, the big cement factory in Gaspésie.
Yeah, so this one, it was a hard one. When we were in the position afterwards, I had to defend that decision over and over again. I have some quotes attributed to me in some newspaper forever defending that decision.
Look, I can go burn down the archives if you want, all right? Nobody will know.
It's
Nobody will
okay.
know.
It's okay because that's politic. You have to be loyal to your team. Sometimes someone else will take a bullet for you another time, and that's the way it works. If you want to resign each time something is not exactly what you would have liked it to be,
You probably shouldn't
it's
be in
not for you.
politics. Yeah.
Absolutely. We have debates behind closed doors. Sometimes you will fight for something and you will lose.
Yeah.
And when the door opens, you go and you defend the decision that the team made. And for me, it's very important. I see a lot of younger politicians getting disappointed
Yeah.
and resigning really easily. I want to tell them, stay.
Yeah.
Stay, because
Stay
maybe
and
the
fight.
next decision you will make a difference. And the things that they don't always move as quickly as you would like, but it's the only way to make things move.
So the cement plant, was it hard? Was the Charter of Values something that made you kind of think twice?
The general idea of
Secularism.
That's
Yeah,
the
it's a
hardest
tough one.
word.
Yeah,
I will say
secularism.
laïcité for the
Yeah,
rest of the
laïcité is fine.
conversation.
Laïcité is a word that the English use now more and more because
Thank
we know
you so much.
it's the French interpretation of secularism versus the British one.
Secularism. I will
Yeah.
try to say it.
That's close.
Just say
It's like I
laïcité.
have a hot potato in my mouth.
It's a tough one.
A hot potato.
No, I agree with the general idea. I'm totally fine with the idea that religion should be something that you live in your private life. That the state and the religion, they have to be separated. In the details, like maybe there are some little changes that I would have done. And what disturbs me is more the tone,
Yeah.
the choice of words sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I think the idea is valid and legitimate. I really believe in that, but I think sometimes we use that as a political weapon.
Yeah, it's a dangerous door to open, right? Because you might have some intentions, but some of the people supporting you or pushing for it are fucking maniacs sometimes, right? And it's not your job to own what they say, but they're there.
It's true for other.
Oh yeah.
I think every political parties, they have their extremists and their kind of maniacs, like you say. But of course, I think most of the people in the PQ who worked on the Charte des Valeurs, the intention was noble. I think it was legitimate to do it, but during the campaign, sometimes I was a little less comfortable. I'd say I never want to in French we say diaboliser.
Yeah, demonize
Some human beings. I don't want to demonize immigrants. I never want to demonize people
who wear the hijab or.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's where my line is drawn.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's hard to avoid,
Yeah,
because politics is what it is, and sometimes it's hard to resist that temptation sometimes to go find more, go get more votes, because it's so easy.
Yeah. When you excite the identity, because it's I find that
popular.
It's really hard in Quebec, like any government. Roads, hospital, schools. Any government in Quebec history since the 1960s would have a very hard time defending their record on those three things. It's because they're friggin' hard to change. And, while we've seen huge societal gains under PQ governments, childcare comes to mind. I mean, our kid, both of us get to work. Mom and dad get to work and have a career. And to me, that's a Quebec value, And so it's there, some of those gains have been great, but by and large, this is a very hard province to run, and it's physically an enormous province with so many opportunities for like the infrastructure to crack here and there. It's really hard to run on your record. And given that the Parti Québécois and the Liberals share the same kind of origin story, how else can you? Oh my God, the cat's puking. That's amazing. Yeah, no. So sorry. So the differentiation often comes with like, all right, these identity issues, and I mean, I'm happy to hear that it gave you pause, and I'm happy to hear that you've thought about it, and I think sincerely, I think of a lot of people, who supported the Charter of Values and who now support Bill 21. The more you learn about how the law is applied and who gets excluded and what happens and who these people are who are excluded, I think the less likely you are to support the harshest measures within that bill. And to me, it was always a question of, I was always really open-minded about the PQ, but it was a kind of like, that was a point of no return for me. That was a little hard to come back from. And it's, things can change, and I think we can all improve and whatever, but you know,
I differ from your position when you talk about excluding.
Mm-hmm.
I don't consider it excluding people. I think it's really important when you compare, the rest of Canada culture and way of seeing the vivre ensemble.
Yeah. Well, the living together, multiculturalism,
yeah, and the Quebecs. For me, it's sometimes some people, they exclude themselves, because religion for me, in my perspective, is a choice. It's not like your ethnicity and it's something that I talk about really often with Canadians. Like, if it's like for you, ethnicity. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
I
don't consider myself. I am from the country of Montreal, so yeah.
Exactly. But it's like for Canadians, religion is really, really part of the identity and the person. And for Quebecers, religion is more of a choice and something that you should live, privately. So if you choose to expose your religion and talk about your religion and practice your religion in public and in schools and at work, and that's something that Quebecers are really uncomfortable with,
given the history with the Catholic Church.
Absolutely. Like baby boomers, they knew priests that were telling mothers to have more kids and controlling a number of things and the society in general, and they are kind of allergic to that. So they kind of scared of now other people's religion coming here and taking a lot of space in the society. And I think we consider it to be a choice, not something that they have to do at all costs,
May I push back?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Do you not find it hypocritical to enforce our will upon people when we're asking them not to enforce their wills upon us?
I understand your point. And it's
very
hard.
Disagreeing.
Yeah, but it's really hard to be, really assertive on those issues, I think.
Yeah.
And there are always some when you really take the time to think about those issues, you will always find some contradictions. I can find yours, you can find mine, because it's really hard to really draw a line and being really sure that you have the truth about those issues, because every person has her experience, his way of seeing things. You can find one woman with a hijab that is really
like a feminist and
it's free will and that's her decision, and you can find others that
you feel pressure.
Exactly the opposite. So it's hard to really have like general rules that apply to everyone. But I think that in the public space, in the state institutions, religion shouldn't be part of it. And if you are really too invested in your religion, to be able to keep it private and maybe take off your religious sign, I think it takes a lot of place and a lot of importance in your way of thinking. I think it's impossible for those persons to, make the distinction between their religion and the work. And in some particular sectors like education and justice and, for officers, cops, and I think
prison guards.
It's a problem. Religion shouldn't be part of it, I think. And, when you were asking me if I was 100% comfortable with the Charte des Valeurs and the Bill 21, the answer is no, because, like teachers, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
And I'm still unsure about it. Like, I'm not sure
well,
because...
what's crazy, if I may, about that is like, so our kid goes to a daycare that's subsidized by the province and the federal anyways. Yeah. One of her, like half of the staff there wear hijabs. And these are super important developmental years, right? From the time you're 1 to the time you're 5, you're seeing a hijab all the time. And if we can allow that for those critical years, then I don't necessarily, like someone has asked me, like, would you have a problem with a Catholic priest teaching math? Like, nah, not really, man. Like, that's obviously just my thing.
Interesting. Yeah. Not math, but like sexual education.
If they stay within the bounds of the curriculum that's been approved, then I would rather see a qualified adult teaching the class, and whose judgment I trust, because you're gonna have shitty teachers no matter what, right? Like there will be a shitty, whether they're a Catholic priest or whether they're the most laïcité person in the world. There's just gonna be shitty teachers.
And some teachers are imposing their political views.
Yeah, that happens all the time. It
happens
regardless
all the time.
of what they wear.
Absolutely, we can always find weaknesses in those policies, but teachers, I'm still unsure.
Yeah.
I'm still unsure, but I think it's a authority.
But I mean, the fact that you're unsure shows that you're thinking about it critically and that you're engaging with it. And look, I mean, that just shows that we're going to eventually win you over. You'll join the Quebec Liberal Party, probably run as a candidate, maybe leader next year, take them to a majority government, reassert Quebec's position within Canadian I'm just kidding. I don't care.
Yeah. But in healthcare, I would have liked for this Bill 21 or the Charte des Valeurs to be able to talk about healthcare too, because I think religion and healthcare is more dangerous than education and religion.
I think if the policy is influenced, right, and if the practice is because you've had people on religious grounds refuse to do certain things as doctors and healthcare professionals.
Yeah.
But if you disallowed like hijabs we wouldn't have hospitals. Like we would be missing like a good chunk of the staff.
It's funny because I'm definitely absolutely against you. But like,
I'm not surprised.
Well, I mean,
I was expecting that.
It's cool. But I live in Quebec. It's not like I'm gonna be with everyone in that regard. Like I work with a bunch of working class people. Like, there's no way we agree on a lot of things. You know what I mean?
And I think
I was gonna say, Chris, was just that I actually agree with you. Where I think religious values would probably influence medical systems more than teaching. I actually think teaching probably not that much, because teachers generally follow the curriculum and they're like, well, that's fine. Whereas like there are people in the States who will not do, for example, abortions because they're Christian. And I'm like, but if that person has a constitutional right to it, well, what are you doing? Right? Like, so I'm definitely on your side about that. Like, I think there's probably more troubling things about that.
And it has nothing to do with religious signs.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, it's invisible.
That's
because
true.
the Bill 21 and the Charte des Valeurs, it was focused towards what was visible, religious signs. You cannot have policies, qui balisent.
Undergird. That undergird would be the
right.
What did you so what? How old were you when you realized like I'm a sovereignist?
Interesting question. My parents were both my families, like my father's family, were Italians.
Yeah.
Traditionally, Italians in
Not
Quebec are not really
pickist, no.
pickist. But my family was immigrated from Egypt. In Egypt, they were already treated and considered immigrants. So when my family immigrated, my grandmother and my grandfather, they wanted to be Quebecers really hard.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't want to be considered as immigrant. They kept their culture. My grandmother, she was speaking with a really strong Italian accent. The food on the table was Italian. A lot of pyramids and Egyptian art everywhere in the house, and they were really attached to their culture, but they wanted to be Quebecers, and they became they became sovereignists a few years after arriving here. And my mother's family also, most of them are for the independence of Quebec. So I grew up in that environment. I remember the 1995 referendum. My family was crying. My mom was crying with her friends, and so I was always in that environment. But when I was a teenager, I wanted to do it the exact opposite from my parents. So I wasn't really interested in those issues. And after 1995 independence, it was not something that was talked about. Families were a little traumatized by the fights and
yeah, it was a dark
Yeah.
like there is this album by the band Les Colocs called Dehors Novembre, and my theory about that album is it's just like about dealing with that post-referendum depression, and a lot of it's about doing drugs, and a lot of it's about this sense of hopelessness,
Yeah.
and a lot of it is about yearning for freedom but not quite finding it. And
we were collectively numb
yeah,
for like 10 years.
yeah,
Maybe probably more. And it came back really gradually. Like when I got involved in the PQ, it wasn't really for the independence of Quebec. It was more because I wanted the liberals out, and I wanted student fees to be lowered, and really
Yeah.
specific
Yeah.
things like that. When I was in the PQ, independence was not really popular. Like
Yeah.
we were not talking about it very often outside of
you could argue that 2014 was lost in part because they could never quite get a handle. Pauline Marois could never quite control that issue and just put it aside. She kind of tripped over herself a few times, and PKP did as well, accidentally mentioning I remember there was a question about like, well, would
it was in his
Quebec have
speech.
its own currency, and like, just don't answer
Oh
that
yeah,
question.
those
Don't answer that
questions.
question.
The army, the currency.
Yeah. They're
always.
like, they're obvious traps. Like, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, but it's interesting because now PSPP, leader of PQ, he talks about it and is really like,
Assumé, as they say in French.
assumé,
Yeah.
and it works. But I think because we are not in the same place that we were 10 years ago, I think
Yeah.
it's evolving, and the Trudeau government, the federal government, I think it's helping the independence
Yeah, well,
popularity for a number of reasons.
when the Conservatives do well federally, the PQ doesn't do as well provincially. When the
Yes.
Liberals do well federally and then get criticized, whatever, then the PQ tends to be. I've noticed that trend over the years.
Yes, because the liberals, they are really centralizators.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They're very
it's a-
closely associated with the Liberals in Ottawa, and
Absolutely, and they have a lot of feuds about immigration right now and a number of issues. So it's like boosting this option of Quebec getting its independence. But back in the days when I was at the PQ, it wasn't really something that was talked about outside of the national councils, like our
behind closed
consensus.
doors.
Yeah, behind closed doors, we were talking about a lot of other issues, but not really independence. And now it's kind of back.
Yeah.
But the more I talk about politics, the more I know about our history about Canada, the federation, and how it works, the more I believe that it should always have been. Actually, Quebec should have been a country at the start, and it was supposed to be a confederation. Canada was supposed to be a confederation, not a federation. And it would have been just normal for a nation like ours to be a state with all the powers. And I think it's really unstable the way Canada works right now.
Right now, it seems extremely unstable. Alberta, Saskatchewan, it's you're right. And
other provinces are quite unsatisfied with the federation right now. And in Quebec, we have, language, immigration, and a number of values that are clashing with the rest of Canada that can add up with the other provinces and satisfactions. But I think it's really, really unstable. We'll see if maybe the Conservative will win the next election. We don't know when the next federal election will be, but Conservative, they tend to decentralize
the power,
a little more. I think it helps for the stabilization of the federation, but we have also other value clash with the Conservative in Quebec.
The immigration thing, because I don't remember this level of kind of open hostility being as strong when you were in the party. And I'll give you an example. There was a poll released the other day where I think it's 2/3 of Parti Québécois supporters right now agree with the statement Canada is intentionally trying to drown out Quebec with immigration. And that sounds like pretty conspiratorial.
Yeah. So here are the stats.
Oh, yeah.
You have them.
We got a chart.
So, the statement is Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon a déclaré que l'adversaire réel du Québec, c'est le régime politique fédéral qui planifie ouvertement et explicitement le déclin du Québec. Yeah. And what that means is PSPP said that it is an explicit effort by the Liberal government to cause the decline of Quebec. Okay? And the responses were as follows. The people in the Parti Québécois was 67% yes, that is a true statement. And then the CAQ group was around 23% is what it says. Québec Solidaire was around 19%. PCQ was 10%. PLQ is not even on there. So, and then overall it was 30% of Quebec that said yes, that is true, and 57% that said no, and then 14% that was like
looks like a referendum result.
Yeah.
Overall,
yeah, it does look like a referendum result.
I don't agree with that statement. I don't think Canada is planning,
it's not Machiavellian.
No, I think that the federal government and the rest of Canada is not that sensitive. Like not sensible, not sensible,
sensitive, yeah.
About our specific issues in Quebec. I don't think they are really interested into protecting French language. I don't think they value the Quebec difference. If we have some different common values that are really, really important for us in Quebec, and we don't feel like the federal government, the Liberal federal government, is really interested in those issues and in those topics. And I think they are, indifferent. Is that the word? Okay, so I think that indifference is harmful. Maybe it's not a big conspiracy in Ottawa to make us disappear with immigration. I don't believe in that, but I think it's harmful, that apathy, that non-interest.
Do you think Quebec has an interest in the rest of the country beyond feeling different? Because I feel that no province is really focused on any other province.
Absolutely, you're right. No, I don't think Quebec is really interested into the rest of Canada. I think
except for feeling different.
Yeah,
except for like that feeling of separation.
No, I think that if you look at the surveys on independence, maybe it's not like we won't be winning a referendum if it happened like next week, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Sure, but if we had a referendum on Canada, like, do you feel Canadian? Do you?
Ontario would say yes.
Probably.
Ontario.
Well,
would.
we often say that I think the only place in Canada
That
where the
identifies as
national
on-
identity supersedes the regional identity is probably Ontario.
Because
Everywhere
in
else-
Alberta,
I'm a British Columbian. Like, I'm from the West Coast, and like, if you ask me, I'd be like, yeah, I'm from the West Coast. I wouldn't say I'm Canadian. You know,
If you're from Newfoundland, you're not even from the Maritimes. You're
That's
from
it.
Newfoundland.
You're from Newfoundland,
Like, it's
yeah.
its own thing.
That's right.
But now Newfoundland and Labrador. But
so Ontario is really the only place that has a
Probably.
national identity.
So I feel like the Canadian unity is getting weaker and weaker, and it's not just in Quebec. I think it's coast to coast problematic.
Hello, everyone watching this. This is Isaac Wild, the producer of this podcast, the producer of many of the Rovers Media stuff. Listen, this episode wound up being almost 2 hours long, so this week is going to be a little 40-minute episode, and the next week will be another 45-minute episode. So please come back for part 2. While you're at it, please subscribe, like below. There's going to be so much more good debating going on. There's a lot of really good subjects that we cover. We talk about we talk about a lot of opinions and a lot of views that are just diverse and different, and we disagree on almost every single point. So please come back next week for the next half of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate all of you. Like, subscribe, and check out all of our other stuff below. Please share this with your friends. Please also check out the rover.ca/support-us. That would really help us. Sign up for the free newsletter, sign up for the paid newsletter. We would really love to have you part of our ecosystem. Thank you so much, guys.